Oh, honey, let me tell you something that'll make your heart stop cold. I was sitting there in that chilly courtroom, my hands folded tight in my lap, my old wool coat buttoned up to my chin. My son's divorce hearing was about to start, and there she was, my daughter-in-law, Melissa, striding in like she owned the place. She caught my eye across the room, and I swear, her lips curled into this smug little smirk, like she'd already won, like I was just some frail old woman, alone on a hard wooden bench, no match for her. She thought I was there to watch my son lose everything, his home, his savings, maybe even his kids. But what she didn't know. In my purse, tucked right next to my peppermint candies and my late husband's old handkerchief, was a manila envelope. Inside it, evidence that would wipe that smirk clean off her face. Evidence that would unravel the lie she'd been weaving for years. And when the judge read what I'd brought, oh dear, her world came crashing down. Let me take you back to how it all began, because this story, it's one you won't forget. The beginning. My kitchen, 5 years ago. Picture my kitchen, dear. It's a cozy little place with sunflower curtains I sewed myself back when my hands didn't shake so much. The linoleum's a bit worn, but it's clean, and there's always a kettle on the stove ready to whistle. 5 years ago, I was 72, still spry enough to bake my famous pecan pie for Thanksgiving. My son, Tommy, and Melissa had been married for 15 years by then. They had 2 kids, my grandbabies, Lily and Ethan, 12 and 9. Oh, how I loved those kids. I'd sit them right at this very table, slicing apples for pie while they told me about school, their little voices filling the house with life. Tommy was my only boy, my pride and joy. He wasn't perfect. Lord knows he worked too much, always at that construction firm, coming home late with sawdust in his hair. But he loved Melissa, or at least he thought he did. She was charming, I'll give her that. Blonde hair, always perfect, nails painted cherry red, and a laugh that could light up a room. But there was something about her eyes, sharp, like she was always calculating. I tried to ignore it. I wanted to love her, for Tommy's sake, for the kids' sake. But deep down, I always felt a little uneasy. It started small, the things I noticed, like how she'd snap at Tommy when he forgot to take out the trash, but smile so sweetly when she wanted something, like that fancy new car she just had to have. Or how she'd talk about money. Always money. "Tommy, we need a bigger house," she'd say, flipping through magazines with glossy pictures of mansions. "The kids deserve better." Tommy would nod, exhausted, and promise to work harder. I'd watch from my spot at the Thanksgiving table, my heart aching for him. He was trying so hard to make her happy, but it was never enough. Then there was the way she treated me. Oh, she was polite enough in front of Tommy, calling me Mama Grace with that syrupy voice. But when he wasn't around, she'd roll her eyes if I offered to watch the kids like I was some burden. Once, when I brought over a casserole after Ethan had the flu, she took one look at it and said, "Oh, Grace, we're trying to eat healthy now." Healthy, as if my chicken and rice wasn't good enough for her. I smiled and said nothing, but it stung, dear. It stung. The first crack, the backyard barbecue. Let me take you to a moment that changed everything. It was a warm July afternoon, maybe 3 years ago now. We were in Tommy and Melissa's backyard, the smell of charcoal and burgers in the air. The kids were running through the sprinkler, squealing, their wet feet leaving little prints on the patio. I was sitting in a lawn chair sipping iced tea, watching Tommy flip burgers at the grill. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped, his smile a little forced. Melissa was flitting around, playing the perfect hostess, her sundress swishing as she laughed with the neighbours. I'd gotten up to grab a napkin from the kitchen when I overheard something that made my blood run cold. The sliding glass door was cracked open, and Melissa's voice floated out sharp and low. She was on the phone, thinking no one could hear. "I'm telling you, Sarah, it's all set," she said. "Once the house is paid off, I'll make my move. Tommy's too busy to notice, and his mum, she's clueless. I've got this in the bag." Clueless. That's what she called me. My heart pounded in my chest and I stood there, frozen, the napkin crumpled in my hand. What was all set? What was she planning? I wanted to march in there and demand answers, but something told me to stay quiet, to listen. I slipped back to my chair, my mind racing. That was the day I started watching her closer, dear. That was the day I knew something was wrong. The inheritance, my husband's legacy. Now let me tell you about my husband, George. He passed 6 years ago, God rest his soul. He was a good man, a carpenter with hands that could build anything. When he died, he left me a small inheritance. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep me comfortable in my little house. There was also a savings account for Tommy, meant for him and the kids when I was gone. George had been clear. "Grace," he'd said, his voice raspy from the cancer. "This is for our family. Keep it safe." I promised him I would. I never told Melissa about the inheritance. It wasn't her business, and frankly, I didn't trust her with it. But somehow she found out. I don't know if Tommy let it slip, or if she snooped through my papers when I was babysitting. But one day, about 2 years ago, she came over with this big smile. "Mama Grace," she said, sitting at my kitchen table. "I heard about George's savings. That's so wonderful. You know, with the kids growing up, we could really use some help. Private school, extracurriculars, it's so expensive." I looked at her, my knitting needles pausing in my hands. "Melissa," I said, calm as I could, "that money's for Tommy and the kids when the time's right. George wanted it that way." Her smile didn't budge, but her eyes went cold. "Of course," she said. "I just thought, maybe we could plan ahead." Plan ahead. Those words stuck with me, dear, like a splinter under my skin. The suspicion grows. A visit to the bank. By last year, things were getting worse. Tommy was working longer hours, and the kids were pulling away. Lily, my sweet girl who used to braid my hair, barely looked up from her phone when I came over. Ethan, who used to beg for my bedtime stories, would mumble hi and disappear to his room. I blamed Melissa. She was always whispering to them, filling their heads with who knows what. I'd hear her say things like, "Grandma's getting old, kids. She doesn't understand how things work now." Then came the day I went to the bank. I'd been getting these strange letters about my account, overdraft notices which didn't make sense. I've always been careful with my money, balancing my checkbook like my mama taught me. So I drove down to First National, my purse clutched tight, and asked to see my account details. The teller, a nice young man named Brian, pulled up my records and frowned. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "there've been some unusual withdrawals, large ones. Did you authorize these?" My heart sank. Thousands of dollars gone. Transfers I'd never made to accounts I didn't know. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "No," I whispered. "I didn't." Brian printed out the statements, and there it was. Transfers to an account with Melissa's name on it. My hands shook as I held those papers. How had she done this? How had she gotten access? I thought of George's savings, the money he'd worked so hard for, and I felt sick. The confrontation, Thanksgiving dinner, Thanksgiving last year, was when things came to a head. Picture my dining room, dear. The table was set with my mother's old china, the turkey golden and steaming, the smell of pumpkin, pie in the air. Tommy was there, looking worn out but trying to smile. The kids were quiet, picking at their food. Melissa, though, she was all charm, passing the mashed potatoes, laughing too loud. I couldn't take it anymore. After dessert, when the kids were in the living room watching football, I pulled her aside. "Melissa," I said, keeping my voice low, "we need to talk about the money." Her face didn't change, but her eyes narrowed. "What money, Mama Grace?" she asked, all innocent. I held up the bank statements, my hand steady despite the anger bubbling inside me. "This money, George's money, the money you've been taking." She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Oh, Grace, you're confused. That was a gift, remember? You said we could use it for the kids." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "I never said that," I told her. "And you know it." Tommy walked in then, looking between us. "What's going on?" he asked. Before I could answer, Melissa put her hand on his arm and said, "Your mum's just tired, honey. She's mixing things up." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just looked at Tommy, my boy, and saw the doubt in his eyes. He believed her. The breaking point, the divorce. A few months later, Melissa filed for divorce. She claimed Tommy was emotionally distant, that he wasn't providing for the family. I knew it was a lie. She'd been planning this, just like I'd overheard in the backyard. She wanted the house, the savings, even custody of the kids. Tommy was devastated, barely eating, barely sleeping. He'd come over to my house, sit at my kitchen table and just stare at his coffee. "Ma," he'd say, "I don't know what I did wrong." I wanted to tell him everything, but I didn't have proof, not yet. I started digging, though. I went through old emails, bank records, anything I could find. I even hired a private investigator, a kind man named Mr. Callahan, who'd helped a friend of mine years ago. He found things that made my heart break. Melissa had been moving money for years, not just from me, but from Tommy's accounts too. She'd opened credit cards in his name, racked up debt he didn't know about. And worst of all, she'd been meeting with a lawyer, planning to take everything in the divorce, the courtroom, the day of reckoning. Now let's go back to that courtroom, dear. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin prickle. I sat there, alone, my purse on my lap, watching Melissa strut in with her lawyer, all confidence. Tommy was on the other side, his tie crooked, his face pale. The kids weren't there, thank goodness, but I could feel their absence like a hole in my heart. The judge, a stern woman with grey hair pulled back tight, called the room to order. Melissa's lawyer started, painting her as the perfect mother, the victim of a neglectful husband. I listened, my hands gripping that manila envelope, waiting for my moment. Then it came. The judge asked if there was any additional evidence. I stood up, my knees shaking but my voice steady. "Your Honor," I said, "I have something you need to see." I handed the envelope to the bailiff, my heart pounding. Inside were the bank statements, the investigator's report, emails Melissa had sent to her lawyer about hiding assets. The judge read through it, her face unreadable. Melissa's smirk was gone now. She was staring at me, her eyes wide with panic. Tommy looked confused, then horrified as the judge started reading aloud. "Mrs. Melissa Thompson," the judge said, her voice like steel. "These documents show a pattern of financial fraud, including unauthorized transfers from Mrs. Grace Thompson's accounts and manipulation of marital assets." The courtroom was silent, except for Melissa's sharp intake of breath. "Can you explain this?" the judge asked. Melissa stammered, her face red. I didn't. Those are lies." But the evidence was clear. The judge didn't just deny her alimony, she ordered an investigation into the fraud. Tommy got the house, shared custody of the boo, kids and Melissa. She left that courtroom with nothing but the truth chasing her, the aftermath, my living room. I'm sitting in my living room now, dear, telling you this. The sun's coming through the lace curtains, and there's a photo of George on the mantel, smiling like he's proud of me. Tommy's doing better. He's got the kids half the time, and they're starting to talk to me again. To really talk. Lily even helped me bake a pie last week, just like old times. Melissa? She's gone quiet, moved to an apartment across town. I don't hate her, not really, I pity her. She thought she could take everything, but all she did was lose what mattered most. I think about her sometimes, wonder if she regrets it. But mostly, I think about my family, about keeping George's promise, about making sure my grandbabies know they're loved. The long road back, my front porch. Oh dear, where was I? Sitting in my living room, I suppose, with George's photo keeping me company. But let me take you out to my front porch, where the air smells of honeysuckle and the old wooden swing creaks under my weight. It's been a few months since that courtroom day, and I've spent a lot of time out here rocking back and forth thinking about everything that's happened. The world feels quieter now, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. It's the kind that comes after a storm, when you're picking up the pieces and wondering how they'll ever fit back together. Tommy's been coming over more, bless his heart. He'll pull up in his pickup truck, the one with the dented fender he never got around to fixing, and sit with me on this porch. We don't always talk about Melissa. Some wounds are still too raw, but when we do, I see the pain in his eyes. "Ma," he said one evening, the sunset painting the sky pink and gold. How did I not see it? All those years and I didn't know who she really was. I reached over, patted his hand and told him, "Sometimes love blinds us, son, but you're seeing clear now." The kids, Lily and Ethan, they're starting to come around too. It's slow, like coaxing a scared kitten out from under the bed. Melissa had filled their heads with so many stories about how I was too old-fashioned, too nosy, too stuck in my ways. But I'm patient. I've got time, and I've got love, and those two things can fix a lot. Last week, Ethan showed up with his skateboard, asking if he could stay the night. We made popcorn and watched one of those old John Wayne movies George used to love. Ethan fell asleep on the couch, his head on my shoulder, and I just sat there, tears in my eyes, thanking God for giving me a piece of my family back. But let me tell you, dear, it wasn't always this hopeful. The months after the divorce hearing were hard. Harder than I expected. There were moments I thought I'd lose Tommy and the kids for good. Let me take you back to those days, to the mess Melissa left behind and the secrets that kept unraveling. The fallout, a visit to the lawyer's office. Picture a stuffy little office downtown, with dark wood panelling and a desk piled high with papers. That's where I found myself a week after the courtroom bombshell, sitting across from Mr. Callahan's lawyer friend, Mr. Hargrove. He was a kind man, with glasses perched on his nose and a voice that made you feel like everything would be okay. But what he told me that day, it shook me to my core. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, sliding a folder across the desk, "the investigation into Melissa's financial activities has uncovered more than we expected." I leaned forward, my hands clasped so tight my knuckles turned white. "More?" I asked. He nodded, his face grim. "She wasn't just taking money from your accounts and Tommy's. She'd set up a shell company, some kind of fake consulting business, and was funneling money through it. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars, maybe more." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. A shell company? That sounded like something from one of those crime shows Lily used to watch. "How did she do this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mr. Hargrove sighed. "She forged signatures, yours and Tommy's. She used your social security numbers, opened accounts you didn't know about, and she was careful, spread it out over years so it wouldn't raise red flags." I thought of all the times she'd been in my house, smiling, calling me Mama Grace, while she was stealing from us. I thought of George's savings, the money he'd worked his whole life for, meant to keep our family safe. "What happens now?" I asked. Mr. Hargrove leaned back in his chair. "The district attorney's looking at criminal charges, fraud, identity theft, maybe even embezzlement. But Grace, this could get messy. It'll mean more court dates, maybe testifying. Are you up for that?" I looked out the window at the grey November sky and thought of Tommy, of Lily and Ethan. I thought of George, how he'd trusted me to protect what he left behind. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I'm up for it." The family rift Christmas Eve was always my favourite night of the year. My living room would glow with the lights from the tree, and George and I would stay up late, wrapping presents and sipping hot cocoa. But last Christmas, it was different. Tommy came over, but the kids didn't. Melissa had them for the holidays, and she'd told them I was the reason their family was falling apart. "She said you turned Dad against her," Tommy told me, his voice breaking as he sat at my kitchen table, a plate of untouched sugar cookies between us. I felt like I'd been slapped. "Me?" I said, Tommy, you know that's not true. I only wanted to protect you, to protect the kids. He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes, the same doubt I'd seen at Thanksgiving when Melissa lied to his face. It hurt, dear, more than I can say. To think my own son, my boy who I'd raised and loved with every piece of my heart, could think I'd hurt him on purpose. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my armchair, the Christmas lights blinking, and I prayed. I prayed for Tommy to see the truth, for Lily and Ethan to come back to me, for the strength to keep fighting. And somewhere in the quiet of that night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Melissa's lies tear my family apart. I was going to fight for them, no matter what it took. The investigation deepens, a nursing home threat. A few weeks later, I got a call that made my heart stop. It was from a woman named Mrs. Carter, who said she was from a nursing home across town. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, her voice all business, "we've received an application for your admission. It's marked urgent, and it lists your daughter-in-law, Melissa Thompson, as your power of attorney." I nearly dropped the phone. "My what?" I said. "I'm 77 years old, Mrs. Carter. I live on my own, I drive my own car, I cook my own meals, I don't need a nursing home, and I never gave anyone power of attorney." There was a long pause on the other end. "I see," she said. "This is concerning. I'll need to verify this with our legal team." I hung up, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold my teacup. Melissa had tried to have me declared incompetent, to lock me away in a nursing home so she could control everything, my money, my house, maybe even my voice. I called Mr. Hargrove right away, and he was furious. "This is a step too far," he said. "We're adding this to the case. It's elder abuse, plain and simple." That night, I sat at my desk, pulling out my old diaries. I've kept them since I was a girl, filling them with recipes, memories, little notes about life. I started writing down everything, every conversation with Melissa, every strange look, every time money went missing. I didn't know if it would help in court, but it helped me. It reminded me who I was, who George and I had been together. I wasn't some frail old woman to be pushed aside. I was Grace Thompson, and I was going to fight. The kids come back. A backyard moment. Spring came, and with it a small miracle. Lily showed up at my house one afternoon, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes red like she'd been crying. "Grandma," she said, standing on my porch, "can I come in?" I pulled her into a hug, my heart so full I thought it might burst. We sat at the kitchen table and she told me everything. How Melissa had been telling her and Ethan that I was trying to ruin their lives. How she'd said I was jealous of her. But Lily had overheard her mum on the phone talking about the nursing home plan. "I knew it wasn't right," Lily said, her voice small. "I knew you wouldn't do those things she said." I held her hand, tears in my eyes. "Sweet girl," I said, "all I've ever wanted is for you and Ethan to be safe, to be loved." She nodded, and for the first time in months, I saw my Lily again, the one who used to braid my hair and laugh at my silly jokes. Ethan came over the next day, quieter but just as hurt. We spent the afternoon in the backyard, planting marigolds in the flower beds, the way we used to when they were little. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The final court date, justice served. The final court date came in June, and oh dear, it was a day I'll never forget. The courtroom was packed. Neighbours, friends, even some of Tommy's co-workers who'd heard about the case. Melissa was there, looking smaller somehow, like the weight of her lies had finally caught up with her. The judge, the same stern woman from before, laid out the charges: fraud, identity theft, and now attempted elder abuse. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, emails, even a recording Mr. Callahan had gotten of Melissa, bragging to a friend about her plan. When the judge read the verdict, the room went silent. Melissa was ordered to pay restitution, every penny she'd taken from me and Tommy plus damages. She faced jail time, though her lawyer was still fighting that part. But the real victory? Tommy got full custody of the kids. Melissa could see them, but only under supervision. The judge looked at me before she left the bench and said, "Mrs. Thompson, your courage has protected your family. Well done." I walked out of that courtroom with Tommy's arm around my shoulders, Lily and Ethan waiting outside. We didn't say much, just drove home and sat in my backyard, the kids kicking a soccer ball while Tommy and I watched. For the first time in years, I felt like we were a family again. Healing, my kitchen table. Now, here I am, back in my kitchen, the kettle whistling like always. The kids are over all the time now, filling the house with noise and laughter. Tommy's dating again, a sweet woman from his office who brings me homemade jam and asks about my knitting. I don't know if it'll last, but I see him smile more, and that's enough for now. As for me, I'm still here, still fighting in my own way. I've started volunteering at the senior centre, helping other folks check their bank accounts, teaching them to watch for scams. I tell them my story, not to brag, but to remind them they're stronger than they think. Melissa's out there somewhere, living with the consequences of her choices. I pray for her sometimes, not because I have to, but because I choose to. Hate's too heavy a burden to carry at my age. The old diary, my bedroom. Oh, honey, let me take you upstairs to my bedroom, where the air smells faintly of lavender and the floorboards creak under my slippers. It's a small room, nothing fancy, just a quilted bedspread, a dresser with George's old watch still in the top drawer, and a nightstand stacked with books I've read a dozen times. But there's something else in here, something I hadn't touched in years until recently. My old diary, the one I kept when Tommy was a boy. It's leather-bound, the edges worn soft, filled with my loopy handwriting from decades ago. After that final court date, I started reading it again, late at night when the house was quiet, searching for answers. Not about Melissa, but about me, about where I'd missed the signs, about how I'd let things get so far. One entry, dated April 12th, 1998, stopped me cold. Tommy was 20 then, just starting at the construction firm, full of big dreams. I'd written about the first time he brought Melissa home to meet us. "She's a firecracker," I wrote, all smiles and stories. "George thinks she's charming, but there's something in her eyes I can't quite place. Like she's watching us, sizing us up. I hope I'm wrong." Reading that now, I felt a chill. I wasn't wrong, dear. I saw it even then, but I pushed it down, told myself it was just a mother's worry. If I'd listened to that feeling, maybe things would have been different. I sat there on my bed, the diary open in my lap, and I cried. Not for Melissa's betrayal, but for all the years I'd doubted myself, for all the times I'd let her make me feel small. I thought of George, how he'd always say, "Grace, you've got a heart big enough to fix the world, but don't let it blind you." I'd let it blind me too long, but no more. That diary reminded me who I was. A mother, a grandmother, a woman who'd survived loss and kept going. And I wasn't done yet. The grandkids' questions, the backyard swing. A few weeks after the court date, summer was in full bloom, and my backyard was alive with the hum of cicadas and the scent of fresh-cut grass. Lily and Ethan were over, sprawled on the old tire swing George had hung from the oak tree years ago. It's one of those perfect summer days where the light filters through the leaves and everything feels just a little softer. I was pulling weeds from the flower beds, my straw hat shading my eyes, when Lily called out, "Grandma, can I ask you something?" I straightened up, wiping dirt from my hands, and walked over. "Of course, sweet girl," I said, sitting on the grass beside them. Ethan was kicking at the dirt, not looking at me, but I could tell he was listening. Lily twisted a blade of grass between her fingers, her brow furrowed. "Why did Mom do it?" she asked. "Why did she take your money? Why did she lie about you?" Oh dear, that question hit me like a punch. I wanted to protect them, to say something simple, but they deserved the truth, or as much of it as I could give without breaking their hearts. "Your mama," I started, choosing my words carefully. "She got caught up in wanting things she thought would make her happy. money, control, a certain kind of life. Sometimes when people want something so bad, they forget what's right. She made mistakes, big ones, and she hurt us all. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. Ethan looked up then, his eyes so much like Tommy's when he was that age. She said you were trying to take us away, he mumbled. She said you didn't want her to be our mum. My heart broke right there, hearing those words from my sweet boy. I reached out, touched his shoulder. Ethan, I would never do that. You and Lily are my world. All I ever wanted was to keep you safe, to make sure you had what your grandpa and I worked for. Lily nodded, but her eyes were wet. I miss how things used to be, she whispered, when we'd all come here for Christmas and you'd make those gingerbread houses with us. I pulled them both into a hug, the three of us sitting there in the grass, the swing creaking above us. We'll make new memories, I promised. Better ones. Your mama's choices don't change how much I love you. Tommy's confession. The kitchen table. That evening, after the kids went to bed, Tommy and I sat at my kitchen table, a pot of decaf coffee between us. The house was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock on the wall. Tommy looked older than his 47 years, his hair greying at the temples, his hands wrapped around his mug like he was holding on for dear life. Ma, he said, his voice low, I need to tell you something. I knew. Some of it. I froze, my spoon halfway to my mouth. Knew what, Tommy? I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. He wouldn't. Meet my eyes just stared at the table. About the money, not all of it, not the shell company or the nursing home thing. But a couple years ago, Melissa said she needed extra cash for the kids' school stuff. I gave her access to one of my accounts. I didn't know she was doing what she did. I felt a rush of anger, then sadness, then something softer I couldn't name. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I was ashamed, Ma. I thought I could handle it, thought she'd stop. I didn't want you to worry. And then, when things got worse, I was too scared to admit I'd messed up. I reached across the table, took his hand. Tommy, you're my boy. You don't ever have to be scared to tell me the truth. We're family. We fix things together. He nodded, his eyes shiny with tears. I'm sorry, Ma, he said, for everything. We sat there a long time, just holding hands, the weight of all those years settling between us. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. A surprise visitor, the front door. A few days later, I was in my living room dusting the mantel where George's photo sits, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Tommy was at work, the kids were at school, so I shuffled to the door, my heart beating a little faster. When I opened it, there stood Sarah, Melissa's best friend, the one I'd heard her talking to on the phone that day in the backyard. She looked nervous, her purse clutched tight, her eyes darting around like she was afraid someone might see her. Grace, she said, her voice shaky. Can I come in? I hesitated, but something in her face, guilt maybe, or fear, made me step aside. We sat in the living room, the clock ticking loud in the silence. I owe you an apology, she said, twisting her hands together. I knew what Melissa was doing. Not everything, but enough. She told me about the money, about how she was securing her future. I should have said something, but I didn't. I was scared of her. I listened, my heart heavy. Sarah went on, telling me how Melissa had bragged about outsmarting everyone, how she'd laughed about my cluelessness. But then Sarah said something that made me sit up straight. She kept a laptop, she said, a separate one, hidden in her closet. I saw it once, when I was helping her move some boxes. She got real mad when she caught me looking at it. I think there's more on there, Grace. More evidence. I felt a spark of hope, mixed with dread. Why are you telling me now? I asked. Sarah looked down at her hands. Because I have a mum too, she said. And if someone did to her what Melissa did to you, I'd want to know. She gave me the address of Melissa's new apartment, said the laptop was probably still there. I thanked her, my mind racing. This wasn't over yet. The search for truth, a risky plan. I called Mr. Callahan, the private investigator, that same afternoon. He was skeptical at first. Breaking into an apartment wasn't exactly legal, but when I told him about the laptop, he agreed to help, as long as we did it by the book. We'll get a warrant, he said. With Sarah's testimony and the existing evidence, it shouldn't be hard. It took a week, but the police got the warrant and Mr. Callahan went with them to Melissa's apartment. What they found was more than I could have imagined. The laptop was there, hidden in a locked box under her bed. On it were emails, bank records, even a spreadsheet tracking every dollar she'd taken, not just from me and Tommy, but from other people too. Friends, neighbours, even her own sister. Melissa had been running a scam for years, using her charm to get close to people, then draining their accounts. The police called it a pattern of predatory behaviour. I called it heartbreaking. The family meeting, my dining room. When the new evidence came to light, I knew I had to tell Tommy and the kids. We gathered in my dining room, the same table where we'd had so many Thanksgivings, so many fights, so many tears. I laid it all out. The laptop, the other victims, the whole ugly truth. Lily cried, hiding her face in her hands. Ethan just stared at the table, his fists clenched. Tommy looked like he'd been punched, his face pale and drawn. I don't understand, Lily said, her voice breaking. How could she do this to so many people? I didn't have an answer. Not a good one. All I could do was hold her hand and say, "Some people lose their way, sweetheart. But we're here, and we're going to be okay." Tommy didn't say much, just nodded, but I could see the weight lifting, just a little. Knowing the truth, as hard as it was, gave us something to hold on to. The community rallies, the senior centre, word spread fast, as it does in a small town. At the senior centre where I'd been volunteering, people started coming up to me, sharing their own stories. A widow named Betty told me Melissa had borrowed $5,000 for a business venture and never paid it back. A man named Carl said she'd convinced him to invest in her fake consulting company. I listened, my heart aching for them, and I realised something. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was ours. We started a support group at the senior centre, calling it Silver Strength. We'd meet every Tuesday, sharing coffee and stories, helping each other check bank statements and spot red flags. I'd bring my pecan pie and we'd laugh and cry, building something new out of the pain. It wasn't just about Melissa. It was about taking back our power, about reminding ourselves that age doesn't mean weakness. A letter from Melissa, the mailbox. One morning, as I was checking my mailbox, I found a letter with no return address. My hands shook as I opened it, recognizing Melissa's neat handwriting. It was short, just a few lines. "Grace, I know you hate me, and I don't blame you. I got lost somewhere along the way, and I hurt people I shouldn't have. I'm trying to make it right. I'm sorry." I stood there by the mailbox, the letter trembling in my hands. Part of me wanted to tear it up, to let the wind carry it away. But another part, the part that remembered George's kindness, his belief in second chances, made me fold it carefully and tuck it into my pocket. I didn't forgive her, not yet, but I felt something shift inside me. Maybe one day, I thought. Maybe. The weight of the letter. My living room. Oh, honey. That letter from Melissa stayed with me like a shadow. I'd sit in my living room, the late afternoon sun slanting through the lace curtains, and I'd pull it out of my pocket, reading those few lines over and over. "I'm trying to make it right," she'd written. But what did that mean? Was she really sorry, or was this another one of her tricks? I'd spent so long fighting her lies, I didn't know if I could trust a single word she said. Yet there was something in those words, a crack in her armour maybe, that made me wonder, could someone like Melissa change? I didn't know, but I tucked the letter into my diary, right next to that entry from 1998, and decided to let time tell. The house was quiet that day, just the soft tick of the grandfather clock George had built with his own hands. I could almost hear his voice, steady and warm, saying, "Grace, you can't carry everyone's burdens. Do what's right for you and the kids." I nodded to his photo on the mantel, as if he could see me, and made a promise to myself. I'd keep my heart open, but my eyes wider. Melissa had hurt us too much for me to let my guard down completely. A family reunion, the Thanksgiving table. Thanksgiving rolled around again, and this time, my dining room felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. Picture it, dear. The table set with my mother's china, the smell of turkey and cornbread stuffing filling the air, and laughter, real laughter, coming from Lily and Ethan as they helped me mash potatoes. Tommy was there, looking lighter than he had in months, his new girlfriend Ellen by his side. She's a quiet woman, with kind eyes and a laugh that reminds me of Belle's. She'd brought a cranberry salad, her mama's recipe, and I could tell she was nervous, wanting to fit in. I squeezed her hand and said, "You're family now, Ellen. Just be you." The kids were different too. Lily, who'd been so quiet last year, was chattering about her school play. She was playing the lead in Annie. Ethan, my little tough guy, was showing off a new trick he'd learned on his skateboard, nearly knocking over my gravy boat in his excitement. It wasn't perfect, mind you. There were still moments when their smiles faltered, when I'd catch them glancing at the empty chair where Melissa used to sit. But we were healing, stitch by stitch, like one of my old quilts. After dinner, as we sat around the table with pie and coffee, Tommy raised his glass. "To Ma," he said, his voice thick, "for holding us together when everything fell apart." The kids clapped, and Ellen smiled, her eyes misty. I blushed, waving them off, but inside my heart was full. This was what George and I had always wanted, a family that could weather any storm. But then, as I was clearing the plates, Lily tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma," she whispered, "do you think Mum will ever come back?" The question hung in the air, heavy as the November fog outside. I knelt down, looked into her eyes and said, "I don't know, sweetheart, but no matter what, you've got us, and we're not going anywhere." She hugged me tight, and I felt her tears against my cheek. Oh dear, those kids. They're my reason for everything. The community confrontation, the town hall, the next twist came at a town hall meeting of all places. Our little community centre, with its folding chairs and flickering fluorescent lights, was packed to the brim. The senior centre's Silver Strength group had organised a forum on financial scams, and I'd been asked to speak. I was nervous, my hands shaking as I stood at the podium, looking out at familiar faces, Betty, Carl, and dozens of others who'd been touched by Melissa's schemes or ones like them. I told my story, start to finish, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. I talked about the bank statements, the nursing home threat, the laptop that cracked the case wide open. The room was silent, except for the occasional sniffle or murmur of anger. When I finished, the applause was so loud it startled me, and I saw tears in Betty's eyes as she stood to clap. It felt good, dear, not because of the attention, but because I knew I was helping someone, maybe keeping another family from going through what we did. But then, as the meeting was winding down, the door creaked open, and there she was, Melissa. She stood in the back, her coat pulled tight around her, her face pale. The room went quiet, like the air had been sucked out. I froze, my heart pounding, as she took a step forward. I need to say something, she said, her voice shaking. Every eye was on her, and I could feel the anger radiating from the crowd. She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed. "Grace," she said, "I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't expect you to, but I'm here to say I'm sorry, to you, to everyone." She gestured to the room, her hands trembling. "I've started paying back what I took, little by little. I'm working with a lawyer to make it right. I lost everything that mattered, and I don't want to be that person anymore. The room erupted. Some people shouted, calling her a liar, while others just stared, stunned. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to believe her, to see the girl Tommy had fallen in love with all those years ago. But another part, the part that had held those bank statements and heard her smirk in that courtroom, wasn't ready to let go. I stepped down from the podium, walked toward her, and stopped a few feet away. "Melissa," I said, my voice calm but firm, "words don't fix what you broke. If you mean it, show it. Not just to me, but to your kids, to this town." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and left without another word. The room buzzed with whispers, but I felt strangely calm. I didn't know if she'd follow through, but for the first time, I felt like I'd taken back the power she'd stolen from me. The kids' healing, a school play. A few weeks later, I was sitting in the high school auditorium, the smell of popcorn and nervous excitement in the air. Lily's school play was about to start, and I'd brought Ethan and Tommy along, Ellen squeezing my hand as we settled into our seats. The curtain rose, and there was my Lily, shining under the stage lights, her voice strong as she sang "Tomorrow." I cried, dear, not just because she was good, though she was, but because I saw her strength, her joy coming back after everything. After the play, Lily ran to us, her costume still on, and threw her arms around me. "Grandma, you came," she said, like there was ever a chance I wouldn't. Ethan, trying to play it cool, gave her a high five, but I saw the pride in his eyes. Tommy hugged her too, and for a moment we were just us. No Melissa, no lies, just a family cheering for our girl. Later, as we walked to the car, Ethan said something that stopped me in my tracks. "Grandma," he said, kicking a pebble, "I don't want to see Mom right now. Is that okay?" I looked at him, my heart aching for the boy who'd been hurt so much. "It's okay, Ethan," I said. "You take all the time you need. When you're ready, we'll figure it out together." He nodded, and I saw a weight lift from his shoulders, just a little. A new beginning, the senior centre. Back at the senior centre, our Silver Strength group was growing. We'd started getting calls from other towns, people wanting to start their own groups to protect their communities. I was no expert, but I shared what I'd learned. Check your statements, trust your gut, don't let anyone make you feel small. Betty, who'd lost $5,000 to Melissa, became my right-hand woman, bringing her famous lemon bars to every meeting and a fierceness I admired. One day, as we were cleaning up after a meeting, Betty pulled me aside. "Grace," she said, her eyes twinkling, "you're a hero, you know that?" I laughed, waving her off. "I'm just an old grandma who loves her family," I said, but she shook her head. "No, you're more than that. You gave us all a voice." Her words stayed with me, dear. I thought about George, about how he'd always said I was stronger than I knew. Maybe he was right. Maybe this whole mess, as painful as it was, had shown me what I was capable of, not just for my family, but for everyone around me. A quiet moment, my backyard. Now let me take you back to my backyard, where the marigolds are blooming bright and the tire swing sways in the breeze. I'm sitting here now, a glass of iced tea in my hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Tommy's doing better, working less, spending more time with the kids. Ellen's become a regular at our Sunday dinners, and I'm starting to think she might be the one to bring a smile back to his face for good. Lily and Ethan are growing up fast, but they still come to me. Lily with her dreams of being an actress, Ethan with his skateboard tricks and quiet questions about life. They're healing slowly, and I'm here for every step. As for Melissa, I hear she's still in town working a job at a diner, paying back what she owes. I don't know if she'll ever be part of our lives again, but I pray for her, for the kids' sake. Not because she deserves it, but because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to hurt. I think about George every day, his laugh, his hands, his belief in me. I kept my promise to him, dear. I protected our family, not just from Melissa, but from the kind of despair that can break you if you let it. And I'm still here, still fighting, still loving with everything I've got. A surprise encounter, the diner. Let me take you to a place I never thought I'd step foot in, dear. A little diner on the edge of town with red vinyl booths and the smell of coffee and fried eggs in the air. It was early spring, the kind of morning where the air's still crisp, but the daffodils are starting to peek through the soil. I'd driven there on a whim, my heart pounding, clutching that letter from Melissa in my pocket. I didn't know what I was looking for, answers maybe, or just a chance to see if her words were true. She was working there now, I'd heard, waiting tables to pay back what she owed. I pushed open the door, the bell jingling above me, and there she was, behind the counter, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, her apron stained with ketchup. She didn't see me at first, busy pouring coffee for a trucker at the bar. I slid into a booth, my hands trembling as I set my purse down. When she turned and saw me, her face went pale, like she'd seen a ghost. "Grace," she whispered, gripping the coffee pot so tight I thought it might crack. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. "Melissa," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. She hesitated, then walked over, her steps slow, like she was afraid I'd bolt. Can I get you something?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her, really looked, and saw someone different. Not the smirking woman from the courtroom, but someone tired, someone carrying a weight I couldn't fully understand. "Coffee," I said finally, "and a chance to talk." She nodded, her eyes darting away, and poured me a cup with shaking hands. We sat there, the diner humming around us, plates clinking, voices murmuring, and for the first time in years, we talked. Not about the money or the lies, but about the kids. "They're doing good," I told her. "Lily's in another play and Ethan's got a new skateboard." Her eyes lit up just for a moment, before the sadness crept back in. "I miss them," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I don't deserve to, but I do. I didn't forgive her, not right then. But I listened. She told me about the diner, about the long hours, about the restitution payments she was making little by little. "I'm trying, Grace," she said, her hands twisting a napkin into knots. "I know it's not enough, but I'm trying." I sipped my coffee, letting her words settle. "Keep trying," I said finally, "for Lily and Ethan. Not for me, not for Tommy, but for them." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and I left the diner feeling lighter, like I'd let go of something I didn't even know I was holding. The kids' choice, my living room, back at home, the kids were waiting for me. I'd told them about the letter, about my visit to the diner, because I didn't want any more secrets between us. We sat in my living room, the fire crackling in the hearth, the smell of cinnamon candles in the air. Lily was curled up on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest, and Ethan was sprawled on the rug, picking at a loose thread. "What was she like?" Lily asked, her voice small. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "She's different now," I said. "Not perfect, not even close, but she's trying to be better. She misses you both." Ethan snorted, but there was pain behind it. "She doesn't get to miss us," he said. "Not after what she did." Lily nodded, but her eyes were softer, like she was wrestling with something inside. I leaned forward, my hands clasped. "You don't have to decide anything now," I told them. "Whether you want to see her, talk to her, that's up to you. But whatever you choose, I'm here. Your dad's here. We're your family, no matter what." Lily reached for my hand, squeezing it tight, and Ethan gave a small nod, his jaw tight. It wasn't a resolution, not yet, but it was a step. And sometimes, dear, that's all you can ask for. Tommy's new chapter, the backyard barbecue. Summer came again, and with it, another barbecue in my backyard. The air was warm, filled with the scent of charcoal and blooming roses. Tommy was at the grill flipping burgers, a smile on his face that reached his eyes for the first time in years. Ellen was there, helping set the table, her laughter mixing with Lily's as they strung fairy lights around the patio. Ethan was teaching a neighbour kid how to do a kickflip on his skateboard, his voice full of confidence. I watched them from my lawn chair, my heart so full it hurt. Tommy and Ellen were engaged now. She'd shown me the ring a week ago, a simple band that sparkled in the sun. "I wanted your blessing first, Grace," she'd said, and I'd hugged her tight, telling her she'd always have it. They were planning a small wedding, just family and a few friends, right here in the backyard. Lily was thrilled, already designing her maid of honour dress, and Ethan, though he'd never admit it, was excited to be the ring bearer. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Tommy came over and sat beside me. "Ma," he said, his voice soft, "I don't know how to thank you for everything." I reached for his hand, my eyes misty. "You don't have to thank me, Tommy. You're my boy. That's enough." He hugged me then, and I felt the years melt away like he was my little boy again, running to me after a scraped knee. The final court update, the lawyer's office, one last trip to Mr. Hargrove's office tied up the loose ends. It was a bright morning, the kind that makes you feel like anything's possible. He sat across from me, his glasses perched on his nose, and laid out the final pieces. Melissa had pleaded guilty to reduced charges, avoiding jail time but facing years of probation and restitution. "She's paying back every cent," Mr. Hargrove said, "starting with you and Tommy, and the others. She's working with the DA to make it right." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. "What about the kids?" I asked. He smiled, a rare softness in his eyes. "The court's leaving that up to them. If they want to see her, it'll be supervised, and only when they're ready." It was the best I could have hoped for, dear. Not just justice, but a chance for Lily and Ethan to heal on their own terms. The moral, my front porch. Now here I am, back on my front porch, the swing creaking as I rock back and forth. The honeysuckle's blooming again and I can hear the kids laughing in the backyard, planning their next adventure. This story, dear, it's not just about what Melissa did or what I uncovered. It's about love, the kind that holds you together when everything else falls apart. It's about trusting your gut, even when the world tells you you're too old, too frail, too anything to make a difference. It's about family, not just the one you're born into, but the one you build piece by piece through the hard times. I think about George every day, his smile, his strength, his belief in me. I kept my promise to him, to protect our family, to keep our love alive. And I think about Melissa too, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of hope. Not for her, but for the idea that people can change, that they can try to right their wrongs, even if it's too late to fix everything. I fought for my family, dear, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. But more than that, I learned something. No matter how old you are, no matter how much you've lost, you've got strength inside you. Use it, protect what matters, and never ever let anyone make you feel small. Thank you for listening, dear. Please don't forget to like this video, share it with your loved ones, and subscribe to our channel for more heart-touching grandma stories that stay with you forever.